This is the Louie Tee Network.
The Redskins Report.
You know what time it is. Welcome all my fellow Redskin brethren and sistren. I am your man and resident Redskins fan, Lou. Thank you for joining me on the Redskins Report. So, 2014 NFL free agency off and running. Week 1 of free agency, aka the market, just about in the books. Want to talk about the Redskins and their free agent activity throughout the week and my emotions and what I was feeling as the moves were being made by the Washington Redskins. Kind of gave you some insight during the free agency preview for the Redskins on the last episode of the Redskins Report. Kind of gave you some insight as to what to look for, because I told you Bruce Allen was going to be a lot more cost efficient than we've been in the past. And so I told you, don't look for the big moves. Don't look for the big names. Don't look for the TJ Wards or the Jarius Birds. That's not what we're going to be looking to do in free agency. We're going to look to fill a lot of holes, and we're going to make a lot of smaller moves, ones that you might not see as impactful, but nonetheless, they're going to help us build depth on this football team. And so without any further ado, let's get straight to the proceedings this evening. Redskins free agency activity in week number 1. I've broken it down into days, day 1, day 2, and I lumped day 3 through 5 together. So you start with day 1, and the Redskins were extremely active in day 1 right out of the gate. And right before free agency got underway, about 11 a.m., and free agency started on Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. At 11 a.m. approximately, Perry Riley Jr. was signed back to this roster. And that was probably one of the most impactful signings of this free agency period to this point, because we can't afford to lose Perry Riley Jr. I didn't want him to get to free agency again. Even if he would have made it to free agency, there's no guarantee that he would have walked off and signed with another team. But I didn't even want that to be an option, okay? I felt like we needed to have Perry Riley Jr. back. And by him going out and signing his 3-year, $13 million deal, he's back in the fold. And he's going to probably take over the Mike linebacker position, which was once held by London Fletcher. As we all know, he's retiring in 2014, and so he will no longer be a member of this football team. So that's a huge vacancy to fill. And Perry Riley Jr. is going to slide over from that Jack linebacker position over to the Mike linebacker. That's the way I feel. I think that's what London Fletcher was grooming him to do, to take over that Mike linebacker position. And the duties of the Mike linebacker is to make all of the calls on the defense. He's going to have that sticker on his helmet, that listening device inside of his helmet. He's going to be doing the play calling on the defensive side of the football, getting everybody lined up. So it's a very important position. He knows the defense. He's been groomed to take over this position. I expect him to move over to the Mike linebacker. That's going to create a void at the Jack inside linebacker position. And so Perry Riley Jr. back on this Redskins roster, and I think it is imperative that this move was made. Again, this speaks to us bringing back our stuff. You got to take care of home first and foremost. That's what all the good teams do. Redskins have done that over the last 2 seasons, bringing back their stuff that's important. And the Redskins do it again, bringing back Perry Riley Jr. in a very cost-efficient deal, 3 years, $13 million. For a guy that we've groomed to take over this Mike inside linebacker position. You look at linebacker Adam Hayward, 3 years, $3 million. When I saw this signing, ex-linebacker from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I immediately thought one thing: special teams help is on the way. And we were one of the worst special teams units in the National Football League last year. I don't have to rehash that. You know how bad and dreadful we were on special teams last year. So bringing a guy like Adam Hayward in from Tampa Bay is going to give us some help on special teams. And this is my theory on special teams. You've got to have 2 fiends on special teams at all times for you to be successful. If you've got 1 or 1.5, it won't do. You'll get gassed on special teams. And what I mean by fiends are guys that will do any and everything to get involved on a tackle on special teams. They're hardly blocked because they're impossible to block just about on a play, and they come down and they smash guys on special teams. When we were at our greatest on special teams in 2012, that's the best special teams unit I've ever seen on the Washington Redskins. And we were dominant on special teams. No one ran anything back on us that year. I can't even remember a big return on us in 2012. We were dominant. Guys were smashing return men in 2012 when we went to the playoffs. And it was because we didn't just have 2 fiends. We had 2.5 fiends. So we went and exceeded the needed amount to be a competent special teams unit. We had Lorenzo Alexander, a.k.a. one-man gang. We had Niles Paul as another fiend. So that was the 2 that was necessary for us to become a solid special teams unit. And then we exceeded it and became a borderline dominant special teams unit with that extra half in Reed Doughty. So Reed Doughty being that final half, 2.5 fiends, we were unstoppable on special teams. You take one-man gang off of this special teams unit and you don't replace him with another fiend, and all of a sudden you got 1.5 and you don't have enough to stop teams from doing what they want to do on special teams. Of course, it always helps when you trust your special teams head coach, and we didn't trust our special teams coach. And so Danny Smith departing, that hurt us as well, but good to have another fiend on this team. Adam Hayward going to come in and immediately impact our special teams in a way that is going to make us a much better special teams unit. He also is probably looking to get an opportunity to get some playing time at that jack inside linebacker position that I just talked about. And so I think we told him when we enticed him to come here that, hey, we're going to give you an opportunity to compete to get on the field at that inside linebacker position opposite of Perry Riley Jr. But we brought you here with the thinking that we want you to be a stud on special teams, and that's what he's going to continue to do. But I also think he's going to compete for that inside linebacker position that is vacant as well. You look at wide receiver Andre Roberts. 4 years, $16 million. This was one of the first moves made in free agency by the Redskins, and also he was the very first receiver signed in free agency this year. And so Redskins hand out a 4-year, $16 million deal for the ex-Arizona Cardinals wide receiver. And this was a confusing signing for me, not because of who it was, what position he played, but because of what this meant for the roster. And I thought his signing meant the end of the line for Santana Moss on his football team. As we all found out a little bit later in the day, that was not the case. So I was confused as to what we told him and what we're going to be asking from him on this football team, because I see Andre Roberts as a number 3 receiver, as a slot guy. He can play the wide receiver. He can play the Z wide receiver. I feel like he's more of a Z, more of a guy you put in the slot and allow him to win one-on-one matchups that way. But I'm thinking we're looking at him as potentially a number 2 receiver. And I'm not saying that that's a mistake, but I don't think that that's a guy that I necessarily want outside. But he can play football. Let's not kid ourselves. Let's not mistake what I'm saying. This guy's a baller. And I feel like he's going to come in and help us upgrade the wide receiver position. I'm still looking for a big target at receiver, though. Okay? I still want my wide receiver to be a big 6'3", 6'4", 6'5" target that can make plays on the football at its highest point, that can catch the back shoulder fade. I'm looking for a guy that creates separation because of his height and his body type. I'm still looking for a big-bodied receiver. So I'd love to see the Redskins get that through the draft. And again, even if the Redskins do draft a receiver that's 6'3", 6'4", 6'5", he's not going to start right away. Andre Roberts most likely is going to start at that wide receiver across from Pierre Garçon, who will be starting at the X. And so I've already come to terms with that. Even though I'm not really that comfortable with Andre Roberts starting at the Y, that's fine. I understand what's going on here with Santana probably still holding it down in the slot, and Aldrick Robinson, I'm hoping, getting more snaps inside the slot as well. I'm hoping that the Redskins are still looking to add a big-time, big, long receiver through the draft. But Andre Roberts coming in, I love the move. Think he's going to help us. He's a playmaker. He's going to get some things done for us on this football team. I was excited about that move. Then I saw another wide receiver added to the mix in Santana Moss. The Tana man is back. And I was excited. I talked about this on the preview, and I said I didn't think he was going to be back. And it pained me to say that, but I didn't think it was going to happen. And lo and behold, Santana Moss back in the fold. He's going to finish his career most likely as a Washington Redskin, which I think is the right thing to do. And this is the thing. You can't coach veteran leadership. All right, Santana Moss is an unquestioned leader in this locker room. And you got to have veterans that everyone looks to for leadership and guidance. No more London Fletcher, but Santana Moss is back, and I think that was important. Last year, when we had all of the nonsense going on in the locker room and Robert Griffin III was running his mouth to the media and kind of letting things out of the house, who went and spoke out against that? Who went and kind of put Robert Griffin III on notice like, hey, you can't do that. That's not how things go in this locker room. That's not how you handle and conduct yourself in the National Football League. Who did that? Santana Moss. And that message was received loud and clear by Robert Griffin III. And I think you have to have that kind of leadership in your locker room at all times. There can't be a time, especially when you've got a young football team. And I feel like we're starting to move towards having a younger football team. You got to have a few veterans that everyone knows, hey, this is a guy that we can look to for guidance and leadership in our times of need. When we're at our darkest and deepest times of despair, we can look to a veteran that's seen it all, done it all in this league, and know that he's going to guide us and steer us through that time and that period. And that guy is Santana Moss for us, the Tana man. And so good to see him back on this roster. Now, this is the only thing that's different this year than past years with Santana Moss. He's not guaranteed a roster spot. In the past, he was one of those guys we would count as a lock to make this roster. When we would be discussing the receiver position, we would start running off receivers and saying, hey, this guy's a lock, that guy's a lock, that guy's a lock. And then you would start counting spots for the receivers. He'd always be included in that discussion. That's not the case this year. He's not a lock, okay? Andre Roberts is a lock. Pierre Garçon is a lock. Leonard Hankerson is a lock. Aldrick Robinson, I think he's pretty safe as well because we re-signed him to a deal. So I could see Aldrick still getting cut, but I feel like he's a guy that we want back because he has something that you can't teach in this league. Speed! So I expect Aldrick Robinson to be back as well. So that's 4 receivers right there, plus a big guy that I think we plan to add in the draft. That's 5 receivers right there. So Santana Moss is definitely going to be vying for a roster spot. He's not going to be given anything this time around. And so, I don't know. If we're keeping only 5, it could be between he and Aldrick Robinson for that last roster spot. If we're keeping 6, then I think he's safe. I think he'll be on this roster. So, it'll be interesting to see how Santana Moss fares throughout all the camps and training camp, and if he, in fact, will be a member of the 2014 Washington Redskins because he signed a 1-year deal. You look at guard, Sean Laval, 4 years, $17 million. This was an unexpected deal. Nobody saw this one coming. No one said, hey, Redskins are talking to Sean Laval. We just looked up, and Sean Laval was a member of the Washington Redskins. He had agreed to terms, and so he's a young guy from the Cleveland Browns. I thought that he performed well at times, but he also struggled at times. But he's a young guard that the Redskins feel like they can still shape and mold into the guard that they want him to be. And I think the Redskins are now taking a new approach on the offensive line, and I'll speak towards this a little bit later on, but I think they're taking more of a bigger approach on the offensive line, as you know, with Mike Shanahan and Kyle Shanahan and their stretch offense and that zone run blocking scheme that calls for more athletic, a lot of times, a lot lighter offensive linemen. So I think the Redskins are trying to get away from that and get a lot stouter on the offensive line and continue to grow as an offense up front by getting some more beef and girth. And Sean Laval is definitely going to add to that. He's a big, big man. And so I think he's going to come in and try to help us solidify this offensive line. And he's, to me, stronger as a pass protector and not necessarily as a run blocker. And I think we're going to try to improve him in multiple areas and get him better. And I'm hoping that he's the replacement for Chris Chester. That's what I'm hoping. Because I don't want Chris Chester starting on this team anymore. I don't mind him continuing to be on this roster. I just don't want him starting. He was terrible last year. I mean, he was responsible for 5 of Justin Tuck's 11 sacks last year. I mean, Justin Tuck had a field day against the Redskins last year, and it was because of Chris Chester. I mean, Chris Chester was terrible last year, and I watched him continue to disintegrate right before my eyes. He got worse and worse as the season moved on, and so I hope Chris Chester is not starting this year. I'd like to see Sean Laval take over at right guard. I'll talk about the rest of this offensive line a little bit later, but Sean Laval is a guy that does need to improve as a football player, but I think he can, I think he will, and I feel really good about this move, getting a young offensive lineman onto this football team that I think is going to grow with this offense. Like that move, 4 years, $17 million, not breaking the bank. Again, all of these moves in day one, extremely cost efficient. You look at the totals, 3 years, $13 million, 3 years, $3 million, 4 years, $16 million. Santana Moss on a 1-year deal, so you know that's not going to be very expensive. And Sean Laval, 4 years, $17 million. None of these deals exceed $20 million in totality. None of these deals are 5-year deals. Everything is reasonable in length as well as cost. And so Redskins extremely efficient in day one. And I love it. I loved our approach because we went with the quantity over quality approach. Not saying that these guys aren't quality football players, but we went with the approach of, hey, we've got a lot of holes. Let's kind of spread our money out over all of these holes. Let's not just concentrate on one particular area or go out and spend an abundance of money on one guy. That's why I told you, don't look for the TJ Wards or the Jarius Birds or any of those guys that are going to cost us a lot of money, because we're not looking to spend that type of coin. We're not looking to spend top dollar for anybody that's going to force us to allocate a lot of our dollars and resources to one particular area. We're looking to spread this thing out. We got a lot of holes, need to continue to build this team. And keep in mind, remember this, and then I'll move on. You do not build your team through free agency. You supplement your team through free agency. And what I mean by that is you're not looking to build a foundation through free agency. You're not. You can't do it through free agency. You're looking to help build depth on your roster through free agency. You're looking to help fill in holes in free agency and kind of make the draft an easier process. But you build your football team through the draft. And so we're looking to fill in as many holes as we possibly can with depth through free agency. And then we're going to continue to build this team, the foundation of this team, through the draft. So we move on to day number 2. Offensive lineman Bruce Campbell, 1 year, $710,000 deal. Again, this is a guy with all the physical tools necessary to really be a solid offensive lineman in this league. It just has not come to fruition. And so this is it for me. This is Bruce Campbell's last opportunity to show that he belongs in the National Football League. If he can't latch on with the Redskins, he's probably going to be on his way out of this league. He's had ample chances with Carolina, with Oakland. It hasn't worked out for him. I think this is the end of the line for Bruce Campbell. And he's a guy that came from Maryland, so he's got ties to this area. And I think he's looking to try to latch on. And as you can see, 1 year, $710,000. There's nothing guaranteed to this guy. He's got to come in, work his butt off, and show the offensive line coaches that, hey, I have something here that you can work with. I can be a competent offensive lineman, and he's a tackle. Probably could play guard in a pinch, but he's more naturally suited to play the tackle position. He needs to show the coaches that if need be, if you got to plug me into the game, I can come in and be competent enough to take over and not have you worry about me not getting the job done. And so he's got to show that he belongs in the National Football League. Be interesting to see if Bruce Campbell is able to do that. And this is one of those competition moves. Let's get as many bodies in as we can at that position and see how many of these guys end up making our roster. And so Bruce Campbell is just coming in to compete and see if he can make this roster as a Washington Redskin. You look at day 3 through 5 and kind of lump these last couple of days together, but a lot of this damage was done in day 3. And there's a fine line that you toe between being cost efficient and being cheap, okay? And at this point, after the first 2 days, I'm like, hey, we're being cost efficient, we're being smart with our money, and we're doing it the right way. However, in day 2, I was kind of expecting to see us go out and attack the secondary. If you remember me talking in the free agency preview video, I talked about the Redskins attacking the cornerback position, more specifically. And I said, I'm not even going to harp on the cornerback position because we're going to attack it through free agency. Remember I said that? So I was looking for us to do that in day 2. When we didn't do that in day 2, I started to get a little nervous because I'm watching all of the higher profile guys at cornerback, at safety, come off the board, and our options are becoming extremely limited. And you know how I feel about corners, all right? I like my corners well seasoned, okay? I don't like the fresh guys. I don't like the guys that are wet behind the ears. I don't like young cornerbacks. We already got one out there in DA, David Amerson. Is he moving to safety? I don't know. I can't answer that. I'm just going off of the assumption that he's going to remain at the cornerback position. And he's a young guy going into his second year. He was beat an awful lot last year, but that's what happens to young corners. It's baptism by fire. And so I wasn't upset with him. He made his fair share of plays. He also got beat. That's why I don't like a lot of young corners, because they haven't adjusted to the speed of the game yet. They haven't seen all the route combinations, and they're still learning the nuances of the game, having to learn eye discipline and do their job and be in control of their responsibilities, not watching the quarterback and getting lost in what they're supposed to be doing. All of those things come with the territory of being a young defensive back in this league. And so I like veterans. I like my stuff well seasoned because veterans have already seen all the route combinations. They know how to read the quarterback. They know what they have to do. They know the speed of the game. They've already adjusted to that. So the mental mistakes, for the most part, are done. It's all about physical limitations at that point. If they get beat, they got beat because of physical limitations, not because of the mental side of the game. And so I don't want any more young corners in terms of guys that we have to trust and start right away. If we draft a young corner, I'm fine with that as long as this guy isn't someone we're relying on right away and he can learn the game, kind of adjust to the speed of the game as well, and learn from D. Hall and some of the other corners that we have on the roster. I'm fine with that. But in terms of someone we have to put in the game and rely on them week in, week out, I need another veteran. And so I was looking for that in day 2. I didn't get it. Now I became a little nervous. Okay, so we move on to days 3 through 5, and we start out with defensive lineman Clifton Gathers. He's a journeyman lineman, 6'8", 340 pounds, so he's a mammoth of a man. But he's been around the league, hasn't really made an impact, hasn't really carved out a niche, has been with the Cowboys, with the Dolphins, with the Indianapolis Colts. Last year he was with the Philadelphia Eagles, had a cup of tea with them, got his most extensive playing time with the Eagles last year. And so maybe we liked what we saw, thought, hey, this is a guy that can help us on this defensive line. At 6'8", you're hoping that this guy can come in and carve out a niche. I mean, at 6'8", just standing up and putting your hands up, you want this guy to be able to affect the passing lanes of a quarterback and really make it tough on a quarterback to throw the football. Also, though, at 6'8", it's a gift and a curse because being that big, I think guys that big tend to just stand up. And it's all about low pad level. Lowest man wins in the National Football League. If he can't keep his pad level low enough, those offensive linemen are going to get up under him and drive him back. And so it's imperative that he stays low in his stance. And I'll be interested to see what Clifton Gathers can bring to the table because, again, he's a big, big man. And I feel like he should be able to impact this defensive line from a defensive rotation standpoint. He should be able to come in, give us some quality snaps. Want to see what Clifton Gathers brings to the table. You move on to the next signee, linebacker Daryl Sharpton, 1 year, $1.75 million. Here's a guy coming over from the Houston Texans. Played sparingly at the middle linebacker position, and he's going to come in and compete with Adam Hayward, and I think we're going to also draft an inside linebacker. He's going to compete for some snaps at that jack linebacker position. He's probably going to compete, and it wouldn't surprise me if he ended up starting at inside linebacker. And it's a 1 year, $1.75 million deal. So again, no strings attached. This guy is getting a chance to come in and compete, and that's all you can ask for. And he's never really been a full-time starter in this league, and he's also been marred by injuries throughout his career so far. So if he can stay healthy, I think he's the guy that can come in and help us. But I think the Redskins honestly want to address that position through the draft and find a guy that they can plug and play day one into that jack inside linebacker position. But Daryl Sharpton is going to get his opportunity, and it would not surprise me if he was a starter opposite of Perry Riley Jr. inside the linebacker position for this defense. And I feel like even if he doesn't start, he'll provide some great depth for us at the linebacker position. And so I didn't have a problem with this move, but let me stop right here though. After this signing right here, I looked at what the Redskins had accomplished in day one, signing Bruce Campbell in day two, and Clifton Gathers and Daryl Sharpton in day three, and I said to myself, are we being cheap? Like I said, at first, after day one, and even after day two, I felt like the Redskins were being cost efficient. But then, after not getting the cornerback or safety, we lost out on Mike Mitchell. I was a little disappointed about that. We were outbid by the Pittsburgh Steelers for Mike Mitchell, and I looked at the deal he got, and I'm like, hey, he did get paid a lot, but was it too much to ask to maybe up it another million or two and see if the Steelers were willing to go that far for his services? I didn't know, but obviously the Redskins didn't feel like he was worth that type of money, and so they moved on. But I'm looking at it like, hey, we still haven't attacked the secondary. We haven't made any impactful moves, and I said, look, I'm not asking for us to go out and make a big splash signing, because those don't win you games. Those don't make you a better football team. Just because you go out and get a big name doesn't mean he's going to come in and perform for you. That's not what I'm saying. Don't go out and make a move for the sake of just making a move to give the fan base something to be excited about. That's not what I'm asking you to do. I'm asking you for you to go out and get an impact player. We haven't done that. If you look at the list of guys that we have up until this point, from Daryl Sharpton over to Perry Riley Jr., outside of Perry Riley Jr., which is our stuff that we needed to have that, you look at the rest of these guys, none of these guys are impact players. And so I'm looking at the list of guys that we've gotten up until this point. I'm saying, where's the guy that's going to come in and immediately make an impact on this team? Because you know it, I know it. In this league, it comes down to how many playmakers do you have, and do they show up at the biggest points in football games? How many do you have? As you all know, we don't have a lot of playmakers. We don't have a lot of difference makers, guys that step up in the most crucial situations in football games. We don't have a lot of guys that are impact players that change the game. And I looked at the list of guys we had gotten to this point. We didn't sign any yet. And so I'm like, hey, are we being cheap? Are we being cheap? Is the reason that we don't have an impact player on our roster through the free agency period thus far in 2014 is because we're being cheap? At first, I wanted to call it cost efficient. But are we being cheap? Is that the reason why we haven't been able to line up a free agent and sign him that is worth giving out a little bit of money and having this guy be someone that we can rely on to make some plays for us in the upcoming season? Are we being cheap? Are we walking that fine line between being cost efficient and just being flat out cheap? And I was starting to say, we're being cheap. I got worried after the Daryl Sharpton move, because I'm saying to myself, what are we doing here? I mean, really, what are we looking to accomplish? I understand we don't want to overspend for anybody. I get that. You've hammered that point home already. I get it, okay? But I'm looking for a guy that can come in and help us win football games. Collectively, as a group, maybe these guys will help us win. Not one of these guys that's been signed up until this point will go out and make an extraordinary play to help us win a football game. I don't feel that way. I feel like all of these guys that have been signed to this point were solid guys that are role players. None of them coming in and doing anything but their job, which is fine. But at some point, you need difference makers to win football games in this league. And we hadn't done it to this point. So now I'm worried. Now I'm feeling a certain type of way about what we've done in free agency. And then Bruce Allen said, okay, I understand. I know where you're coming from. Here we go. We signed Tracy Porter, cornerback from the Oakland Raiders. We needed help in the secondary. I talked about it. I expected to get help. Help's on the way in the form of Tracy Porter. Started to feel good. I kind of breathed a sigh of relief. I was excited about that move. Still not satisfied with what we had done because Tracy Porter, even though I think he can impact this team greatly, still not the difference maker I was looking for. However, we needed help in the secondary. There's no mistaking that. He's going to come in and provide that help. We all know about the big pick he had in the Super Bowl for the Saints against the Indianapolis Colts to help them win that game and his time in New Orleans. He went and parlayed that into a contract with the Denver Broncos. It did not work out in Denver. And he had a seizure and he missed most of that season. Broncos cut him loose. He ends up landing in Oakland where I thought he rejuvenated his career. And he spent most of his time in the slot in Oakland, which I feel like is a beautiful move by the Redskins because bringing him in allows us to move D'Angelo Hall around like a chess piece because I would love to see Tracy Porter continue to play in the slot. D. Hall will play in the slot sometimes. Porter can also kick outside and be a boundary corner, but that'll allow us to move D. Hall into the slot, move D. Hall out to a boundary corner, move him to safety at times, just move him around, have him in positions to make plays. And again, you need to have a solid slot corner in this league because teams run 3 and 4 wide receiver sets like it's nothing. That used to be a big deal in the National Football League. Now, some teams' base sets are out of 3 and 4 wide, and so it's a great move to bring Tracy Porter in. 2 years, $6 million for Tracy Porter. So again, not overspending for the services of one of the guys we're bringing in. And I think he's going to have an immediate impact. And he fits what I'm looking for, a well-seasoned corner that's been in this league, seen it, done it all, and understands what he has to do out on the football field. Exactly what I was looking for at the cornerback position. Now you move on to the one that made me feel good about this free agency period for the Redskins thus far. Defensive lineman Jason Hatcher, 4 years, $27.5 million for Jason Hatcher. By far the biggest contract the Redskins have handed out in the 2014 free agency period. This is a guy that's a huge difference maker. And we've seen him for the last 8 years, twice a year with the Dallas Cowboys. Finally got an opportunity to start and get a lot of snaps last season. And what did he do with it? 11 sacks for the Dallas Cowboys from the defensive tackle position. And we know how hard it is to go out and perform at that level from the defensive tackle position. It's rare to see a defensive tackle in this league get double-digit sacks, but Jason Hatcher was able to do that. And so I feel really good about this signing. He's a difference maker. He's a guy that's going to come in and get pressure on the quarterback. And you can never have enough pressure on a quarterback. And that was one of our positions of weakness last season, was our defensive line, because we didn't get a lot of pressure from our defensive line. No sacks from Stephen Bowen last year. No sacks from Jenkins or any of those guys. We struggled on this defensive line. Adam Carricker was injured, and he had gotten us 5.5 sacks in 2012. So the fact that we were banged up along that defensive line and guys weren't performing at a high level, we weren't getting a lot of pressure. If it didn't come from one of our outside linebackers, or we didn't blitz one of our safeties or one of our corners, we weren't getting to the quarterback. If it wasn't Perry Riley or London Fletcher from up the middle, one of our linebackers or one of our secondary members, we weren't getting pressure. Our defensive line did nothing in the form of pressure last season. So this is a huge upgrade for us, a guy that can impact the game immediately. And he's a difference maker. And that's what we need on this football team. And so I was elated after the Jason Hatcher move. That move, coupled with the Tracy Porter move, made all the rest of these moves understandable. They made all the rest of these moves fit into place. They had reasoning. Now, I understood what the Redskins were trying to do. And so I'm happy with the Redskins this free agency period thus far. They also signed kicker Jake Rogers to come in. He's a journeyman kicker. Still a relatively young guy, but has had a cup of tea with New Orleans, Dallas, and another team or two, but has never seen action in the National Football League, has only been invited to camps. And so I think he's being brought in because Kai Forbath lacks the power to get touchbacks on the kickoff. We don't have a punter right now. We got rid of Sav Rocca. Thank you for doing that. And so we need a punter. And my rationale here is, hey, leave our guy, my guy, your guy, our guy, Kai Forbath, leave him alone and find a punter who can double as our kickoff specialist, okay? Kai Forbath shouldn't be ran off of this roster because he can't kick the football in the end zone. Find a punter that can do that, okay? Kai Forbath has shown us that he can make field goals and make them at a relatively high clip. Is Kai Forbath going to nail home a 54-yarder? Probably not. I don't feel comfortable sending him out there for a 54-yard field goal. But I feel good about him from 52 and in. I feel really confident that if I asked Kai Forbath to nail a 51-yarder for me, to hit a 47-yarder, he'll do it 9 times out of 10, no problems, no questions asked. And that's what I want out of my field goal kicker. I could care less if he can kick the football in the end zone consistently. Find a punter that can do that. Last year, it impacted us, though. Because in 2012, when we first got Kai Forbath and he wasn't kicking it into the end zone, it didn't matter because we had 2.5 fiends on special teams. Guys weren't even getting it back to the 25-yard line on our special teams units. So it didn't matter then, but it matters now because our special teams unit hasn't been up to par. And so kicking it at the 5-yard line and allowing them to bring the football out, it was a detriment to us last year. But I see what they're doing. I understand what the rationale is here. I don't care about that. Get a punter that can kick the football off and kick it into the end zone. Get a strong-legged punter and let him do that. Leave Kai Forbath alone. He's a consistent kicker in this league. He doesn't need to go anywhere. It took us a long time to find a consistent field goal kicker. He needs to be around. If they want to bring Jake Rogers in to compete and have him be a camp leg, fine. I don't care about that. But unless he comes out and wows you and outperforms Kai Forbath in the preseason and throughout all the camps, he doesn't need to make this roster. And if Kai continues to be Kai, then he needs to continue to be our guy. So Redskins add a kicker. And then they cut center Will Montgomery loose. And Will Montgomery struggled last year. And he just received a contract extension from us last season. So you know, that kind of speaks to what the Redskins are trying to do. It's a new movement along the offensive line, and I talked about that a little bit briefly with Sean Laval. And here's what I think the Redskins are trying to do. They're trying to get bigger, you know, more stout at the point of attack, because the tackles I thought were solid last year. Trent Williams, one of the best in the league at left tackle. I thought Tyler Polumbus wasn't that bad last season, okay? I thought our problems were in the interior of our offensive line, mainly center and right guard Chris Chester. And they were being blown up. They were being driven back into the lap of the quarterback. Chris Chester could not handle the speed of guys that were faster than him. If you can't handle the speed or the power, what can you do? And so we were dominating on the interior. And that's the worst type of pressure a quarterback can receive. Robert Griffin III didn't stand a chance last year because pressure was being applied right in the middle of our offensive line. And you can't run away from that type of pressure. It's one thing if a guy comes from the outside, you can step up and avoid him. But when it's coming right in your face, it's hard to avoid that type of pressure. And we were having that pressure applied to us all season long. I talked about Justin Tuck having a field day against us. He wasn't the only interior defensive lineman to dominate us. And so we had issues along our offensive line. And Will Montgomery was one of those issues. And so they got rid of him. And what I'm thinking they're going to do is slide Corey Lichtensteiger over from left guard to center and kind of beef up that center position. And I feel like Corey can do it. And then we need to fill in that left guard position. Is Laval going to do that? Are they going to keep Chester at right guard? I hope not. I hope that's not the case. I hope they take Chris Chester out and move Laval into right guard, and we find ourselves an upgrade at left guard through the draft. I feel like we can draft a guy early on in the second round as our first pick, plug and play him from pick number 34, and stick him in as our left guard and not look back. That's what I want us to do. Will we do that? I have no idea what the Redskins are going to do, but I'm hoping that's what we do. But Will Montgomery has been released. And let me ask you this, and then we'll get out of here. Has this offseason, this free agency period for the Redskins, has this been somewhat confusing to you? It has been for me. And I say that because much like our coaching search when we had a coaching vacancy and we went and hired Jay Gruden, we were talking to everyone when we were looking for our next head coach. Every single coach that was out there on the market, the Redskins were linked to in some form or fashion. Looking at the free agents on the market, it seems the same way. Remember when free agency was just getting underway and we were linked to Jarius Byrd and we were linked to Kenny Britt and we were linked to all these different players? We were supposed to have Brandon Browner come to our facility. We were supposed to have Antonio Smith from the Texans come to our facility. That one hurt because I really wanted Antonio Smith in here. He's a guy that could get pressure on the quarterback. But forget about Antonio Smith. He ended up signing with the Raiders anyway. We ended up getting Jason Hatcher. And I didn't see us getting Jason Hatcher because if you remember throughout the process, he was supposed to go to Seattle, and he did. He was supposed to go to Oakland, and he did. And I said, okay, him going to Seattle doesn't scare me. And at the time, I didn't see him being on the Redskins' radar anyway. But I said, he's not going to be signed by Seattle. They don't have any money. And Jason Hatcher has already made it clear to anyone who will listen that, hey, I'm trying to break the bank. At 32 years old, I don't have another contract in me. I got to get paid, and I got to get paid now. Seattle can't offer him the kind of money he was looking for. So then when he went to Oakland, I said, that's probably where he'll end up. Raiders got plenty of money, the most cap space of any team in the league in 2014. And they got a need along their defensive line. They've got a plethora of needs along their football team, especially their defensive line. He's not making it out of Oakland. But Oakland probably said, hey, you're 32 years old. You're looking for X amount of dollars. We're not giving you that kind of money at your age. No, we're not signing you up. So he moved on. Redskins had a deal on the table. He signed with the Redskins. So I didn't see that one coming, but we were linked to so many different guys. I mean, everybody that was out there, they were saying, hey, Redskins are interested. Redskins are interested. Redskins are interested. And I'm just like, wow. I mean, where are we going? Like Anthony Spencer? You can never have enough pass rushers in this league, but what are we going to do with Anthony Spencer? I mean, he's not starting on our football team, obviously. We still have Brandon Jenkins that I want to see us groom and mature. What are we going to do with Anthony Spencer? At 30 years old, I think he still feels like he's a starting caliber outside linebacker in this league. So why would you want to bring a guy in here that might cause some kind of confusion as to what his role will be on this team? Look, I don't know. But we were talking to everyone, it seemed like. But when it's all said and done, we brought the guys in that we thought could help us. We got Donald Penn coming on Sunday to our facilities. It'd be a nice get if we could get Donald Penn on our football team, ex-Tampa Bay Buccaneers left tackle. Obviously, he wouldn't be playing left tackle for us. He'd be playing right tackle if we could get him on our football team. Very reliable, big tackle. Has over 100 starts under his belt in this league. So he's very experienced and a guy that you can rely on, that you can trust, that each and every Sunday he's going to lace him up and be on the football field for you. And so I'd feel really good about us getting our hands on Donald Penn if we were able to sign him to a free agent contract. And if the Redskins do nothing else in free agency, I'd be totally fine with that. The totality of what we've done to this point, I'm fine with it. Because We filled a lot of different needs on this team. We filled a lot of different holes. We've thrown stuff at these holes, okay? Nothing definitive, just a lot of stuff. A lot of guys that we're asking to come in and compete. I don't have a problem with that. Again, free agency is not where you build your team. You build depth through free agency, but you don't add foundation and building blocks through free agency most of the time. You know, you might get a gem here and there every so often, but for the most part, you're looking to add depth and fill out your roster through free agency. The draft is where you build your team. And so, have we gained a lot of starters through free agency? Probably not. Maybe Andre Roberts and Sean Laval, Tracy Porter and Jason Hatcher might be potential starters. We brought back Perry Riley Jr. You know he's a starter, but a lot of these other guys, Adam Hayward, Santana Moss, Bruce Campbell, Clifton Gathers, Daryl Sharpton, Jake Rogers, those guys aren't starters, most likely. But they help us build depth on our roster. They help us fill some of these voids on our roster. So I would love to get Donald Penn. If you told me after Donald Penn that we were closing up the briefcase, putting the snaps down, locking it up, and walking away, and we were done with free agency, I'd tip my cap to the front office and say, job well done, guys. Job well done. You went out, you got us an impact player in Jason Hatcher, didn't overspend for him, okay? You went out, got Tracy Porter, some well-needed help in the secondary, and then you filled up the rest of the roster with guys that you feel like can come in and compete and help us in 2014 and moving forward. And you didn't overpay for anybody. Job well done, fellas. That's what I would say if we were done with free agency, because I feel like all the rest of the moves that we need to make can be made through the draft. We can go out and draft us a safety to come in and help us. We can go out and draft us an inside linebacker to come in and help us. We can draft us a big-bodied receiver to come in and help us. We can draft us an offensive guard, maybe a tackle, to help us along our offensive line. We can draft us some more guys to help us at the linebacker position, at cornerback, potentially another safety. Wouldn't be surprised if we doubled down on the safety position, doubled down on inside linebacker, doubled down on guard. So I feel like we've filled enough holes through free agency that the draft has become clear to us. We know what we need to do, and now we can go out and execute. So if we're done with free agency and we don't make another move other than Donald Penn, and even if we don't make the Donald Penn signing, I'm fine. If we shut the briefcase, put the snaps down, and walk away from free agency, I'll feel good about what we've done. Feel like we're ready for the draft. And so that's my sentiments about the Redskins in week 1 of free agency. Of course, I don't think we're done, but if we are, I'll feel good about it either way. I am a Redskins fan, etched in burgundy and gold. My Redskins spirit will never die. My Redskins spirit will never, ever fold. Till we meet again, hail to our Washington Redskins. Feel good about what we've done. I think there's a little work to be done, but I think that can be solved with Donald Penn, because I feel like if we get Donald Penn, solidify that tackle position, I don't think you need to necessarily draft a tackle in this year's draft. You can hold on to Tyler Columbus, have Donald Penn. We still got Tom straight out of Compton, and then you got Trent Williams. I don't think you need another tackle. So if we get Donald Penn, I think you solidify the tackle position, and you don't have to spend a pick in the draft at tackle. You can use that pick to fill another need on this team. Maybe double up on a position that we might not have been able to double up on before. So that's the last thing I think we need to do in free agency, and then close the briefcase and get ready for the draft. So that's my time for today. I thank you for joining me. Have a good one. Enjoy the rest of free agency. You'll see me soon here on the Redskins Report.
Like the content? Want more? Sub up. The Redskins Report.